The first time I failed the most feared boy in the city, I thought I was risking my career. I had no idea I was about to change a father's life. The rain tapped softly against the classroom windows that Monday morning, turning the world outside into a blur of gray and silver. I stood beside my desk, organizing spelling tests while the scent of sharpened pencils and freshly printed worksheets filled the room. It should have felt like any other school day. Instead, a strange tension hung in the air before the first bell had even rung. The reason arrived exactly at 7:42 a.m. Three black SUVs rolled into the school parking lot. Their headlights cut through the rain like bright knives. Every teacher in the front office stopped talking. Even through the glass, I noticed the subtle shift in people's faces. Shoulders stiffened. Conversations died. Coffee cups froze halfway to waiting lips. I didn't need anyone to explain why. Everybody in the city knew the name Moretti. Vincent Moretti owned businesses, charities, construction companies, and half the skyline if local rumors were to be believed. He was powerful enough that people lowered their voices when speaking about him. His son, Noah Moretti, attended my fifth-grade class. The rear passenger door opened. Noah stepped out wearing a Navy school uniform that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. He was 10 years old, blonde hair neatly combed, expensive shoes untouched by puddles. A bodyguard held an umbrella over his head while he walked toward the entrance without looking at anyone. What always surprised me wasn't how important Noah seemed. It was how lonely he looked. Most children ran into school laughing. Noah entered every morning like a visiting executive, surrounded by adults, isolated from everyone his own age. I watched from my classroom doorway as students hurried through the hallway. The moment Noah appeared, several children immediately moved aside. Nobody told them to. Nobody needed to. They simply did. Fear has a way of teaching lessons all by itself. 20 minutes later, my classroom was full. 27 students settled into their seats while rain continued tapping against the windows. I greeted each child by name. When I reached Noah's desk, he barely looked up from his tablet. "Good morning, Noah." "Morning." His eyes never left the screen. A few minutes later, class began. We reviewed reading assignments, worked through math problems, and discussed a history project. Everything seemed normal until recess. That's when I noticed something. A boy named Ethan sat alone near the back of the room, staring down at his desk. Ethan was quiet but kind, the sort of child who apologized when someone else bumped into him. Usually he smiled often. Today he looked miserable. "Ethan," I said gently. "Everything okay?" He hesitated, then nodded too quickly. "Yes, ma'am." The answer didn't convince me. Neither did the way several students exchanged nervous glances. Children reveal secrets with their eyes long before they speak them aloud. The rest of the morning passed, but the feeling stayed with me. Something was wrong. I could sense it. At lunch duty, I finally saw the first clue. Noah sat at a table surrounded by other students. Not friends. Followers. There is a difference. Friends laugh together. Followers laugh when they're supposed to. Across the cafeteria, Ethan sat alone, his lunch tray untouched, his shoulders slumped. When Noah said something from across the room, several children immediately laughed. Ethan lowered his eyes toward the floor. My stomach tightened. I had been teaching long enough to recognize the signs. Sometimes cruelty doesn't arrive shouting. Sometimes it arrives smiling. After lunch, students returned to class. As they filed inside, I noticed a crumpled piece of paper near Ethan's desk. I picked it up automatically. The paper contained a cartoon drawing of Ethan with exaggerated features and several handwritten insults beneath it. More laughter followed from somewhere in the room. Ethan's face turned red. Noah leaned back in his chair, not smiling, not embarrassed, simply watching. In that moment, a quiet certainty settled inside me. For the first time all year, I looked directly at Vincent Moretti's son and realized something important. The city might fear his father. The school might avoid confrontation. The students might stay silent. But inside my classroom, every child followed the same rules. And whether Noah Moretti liked it or not, that lesson was about to begin. The final bell before afternoon classes had not even rung when I asked Ethan to stay behind. The other students streamed into the hallway, their voices fading into distant echoes. Rain still streaked the windows. The classroom suddenly felt larger and quieter. Ethan kept his eyes fixed on the floor. He twisted the sleeve of his sweater between nervous fingers. "Ethan," I said softly, "you are not in trouble." He nodded but did not speak. I sat on the edge of a desk so I would not seem intimidating. Did someone make that drawing? His shoulders tightened immediately. That was all the answer I needed. You do not have to tell me if you are uncomfortable, I said. But nobody deserves to be treated that way. For several seconds, he remained silent. Then his voice emerged barely above a whisper. It was a joke. I sighed. Children often called cruelty a joke because admitting the truth felt worse. Did you think it was funny? He shook his head. No, ma'am. Then it was not a joke. His eyes glistened for a moment before he quickly looked away. Before I could say anything else, the classroom door opened. Noah walked in carrying his tablet beneath one arm. He stopped when he saw us talking. His expression remained calm. Too calm. You needed something? I asked. I forgot my charger. His gaze drifted toward Ethan. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. Not warm. Not friendly. Just confident. Ethan immediately gathered his books. Can I go now? He asked. Of course. The moment Ethan left, the room changed. Noah walked toward his desk and picked up a charging cable. He knew I was watching him. I knew he knew. Neither of us said anything for several seconds. Finally, I spoke. Did you draw that picture? Noah slipped the charger into his backpack. What picture? The one mocking Ethan. No. The answer arrived too quickly. Did your friends draw it? He shrugged. Maybe. Do you think it is acceptable? Noah looked directly at me. His blue eyes were remarkably similar to the photographs I had seen of his father in magazines and newspapers. Calm. Calculating. Controlled. People make jokes. At someone else's expense. It happens. I folded my arms. Not in my classroom. A faint smile appeared again. You take this stuff really seriously. I do. He nodded slowly, as if evaluating me. Then he said something that made my stomach sink. Most teachers do not. The confidence in his voice told me this was not the first time he had gotten away with something. It was not arrogance born from one moment. It was a habit, a belief, a lesson learned over many years. Rules existed for other people, not for him. The next morning, that belief became impossible to ignore. We were halfway through a reading exercise when a commotion erupted near the supply cabinet. Two students stood arguing. One looked embarrassed. The other looked angry. At the center of it stood Noah. What is going on? I asked. Silence. Several students exchanged nervous glances. Finally, one girl raised her hand. Noah told everyone that Ethan got his project from the internet. Ethan immediately stood up. I did not. His face burned bright red. I worked on it all weekend. Noah leaned back in his chair. Then why does it look so professional? A few children laughed. Ethan looked devastated. I felt something inside me harden. This was not teasing anymore. This was deliberate. Calculated. Public. Noah, I said firmly. Stay after class. For the first time all year, surprise flashed across his face. The room went silent. 26 students stared at me. Noah slowly crossed his arms. Why? Because we need to discuss your behavior. His expression shifted. Not fear. Not embarrassment. Disbelief. As if nobody had ever challenged him before. Then he asked the question that every child in that room had been expecting. Do you know who my father is? The question hung in the air like a challenge. 26 students stared at me. Noah stared too. His expression carried the confidence of someone who had never heard the word no and believed he never would. Outside, rain continued sliding down the classroom windows. Inside, nobody moved. I set my marker down on the desk and met his gaze. Yes, I said calmly. I know exactly who your father is. A few students exchanged nervous glances. Noah seemed surprised that I had not backed down. Then you know this is ridiculous. What is ridiculous? I asked, keeping me after class. His voice remained steady. I did not do anything wrong. I looked around the room. Several students immediately looked away. Ethan lowered his eyes to his notebook. The silence spoke louder than words. Class, I said gently. Please continue working on your reading assignment. The sound of pages turning slowly filled the room. Noah remained standing. Sit down, I told him. For a moment, I thought he might refuse. Then, with visible reluctance, he dropped back into his chair. The rest of the lesson passed under a cloud of tension. Every answer Noah gave sounded sharper than usual. Every instruction I offered seemed to irritate him. When the dismissal bell finally rang, students practically rushed toward the door. Within seconds, only Noah and I remained. The classroom felt strangely quiet. Chairs sat neatly in rows. The rain had finally stopped. Pale afternoon sunlight filtered through the clouds. Noah leaned back in his seat. Can I go now? Not yet. He sighed dramatically. This is a waste of time. Then let us make it useful. I sat across from him. Why are you targeting Ethan? I am not. You embarrassed him in front of the entire class. He is too sensitive. Or maybe you are too comfortable making other people uncomfortable. His eyes narrowed slightly. You always take his side. I take the side of fairness. He looked away toward the window. For the first time since I had met him, I saw something unexpected. Not arrogance. Not confidence. Frustration. The kind children carry when they do not know how to explain what they feel. Do you know what everybody does around you? I asked quietly. He shrugged. Nothing. Exactly. He frowned. What does that mean? Nobody tells you when you are wrong. His jaw tightened. Because I am usually right. I almost smiled. Noah, every human being is wrong sometimes. Not about this. About what? He hesitated. Then he said something that caught me completely off guard. People only like Ethan because they feel sorry for him. The statement was not cruel. It sounded honest. That was what made it troubling. He actually believed it. And how do you know that? I asked. Because nobody ever picks me. The answer landed harder than I expected. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Suddenly, the picture became clearer. The expensive clothes. The bodyguards. The distance between him and every other child. Noah had classmates. He did not have friends. Before I could respond, he quickly looked away as if he regretted saying it. His expression hardened again. The wall came back up. Whatever. It does not matter. But it did matter. More than he realized. The following morning, the students took a weekly reading comprehension assessment. It was a routine test worth a significant portion of their grade. Everyone worked quietly. The room remained peaceful. 40 minutes later, I collected the papers and began grading them during my planning period. Most scores were average. Some were excellent. Then I reached Noah's exam. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Every answer was correct. Perfect, in fact. Too perfect. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. I opened his desk folder and compared the handwriting from previous assignments. The difference was subtle but undeniable. Several responses contained vocabulary far beyond his normal writing level. My concern deepened. Later that afternoon, while organizing materials, I discovered a folded answer sheet tucked behind a shelf near Noah's desk. My heart sank. The answers matched the test exactly. I stared at the paper for a long moment. Then I closed my eyes. Because I already knew what came next. And for the first time in Noah Moretti's life, somebody was about to give him the grade he had earned instead of the grade everyone expected. I did not sleep much that night. The folded answer sheet sat on my kitchen table beside a cold cup of tea. Every time I looked at it, I reached the same conclusion. The evidence was clear. The decision should have been simple. Yet I knew it would not feel simple once the consequences arrived. By 7 o'clock the next morning, I was standing in my classroom watching students file through the door. The air smelled faintly of rain and fresh paper. Conversations bounced off the walls. Laughter appeared and disappeared in small bursts. Everything felt normal. Until Noah walked in. He took his usual seat near the window and opened his tablet without looking at anyone. For a brief moment, I wondered if I should give him another chance. A warning. A private conversation. An easy exit. Then I remembered Ethan's face. I remembered the confidence with which Noah believed rules belong to other people. Some lessons only begin when excuses end. After lunch, I handed back the reading assessments. Papers moved from desk to desk. Students immediately checked their scores. Smiles appeared. Groans followed. The familiar rhythm of every classroom in America. Finally, I stopped beside Noah's desk. His hand reached out automatically. I placed the paper in front of him. A large red F stared back from the top corner. The room became silent. Noah blinked once, then twice. He looked at the grade as though it belonged to somebody else. What is this? He asked. Your score. Several students stopped breathing. At least that was how it felt. Noah slowly lifted his eyes toward me. There has to be a mistake. There is not. His face turned pale. I answered everything correctly. You submitted answers that were not your own work. The silence deepened. 26 students stared at us. Nobody moved. Noah laughed once. Short, sharp, disbelieving. You cannot be serious. I placed the folded answer sheet on his desk. I found this behind your seat after the test. His expression changed instantly. The confidence disappeared for half a second before returning. That proves nothing. The answers match exactly. Maybe somebody copied me. The handwriting does not match your work from previous assignments. His jaw tightened. Around us, students exchanged nervous looks. The atmosphere felt electric, not because of the grade itself, because everyone understood what it represented. This was the first time anyone had challenged Noah publicly. "You failed me," he asked quietly. "You failed yourself." The words left my mouth before I could soften them. Noah stared at me. Something flashed behind his eyes. Anger, embarrassment, hurt, maybe all three. Then he stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. Several students jumped. "You cannot do this." His voice carried across the room. "Actually, I can. My father is going to hear about this. That is your choice." The room seemed to freeze. Noah looked almost shocked by my answer. Most adults probably would have panicked. Most adults probably would have started explaining themselves. I simply waited. Eventually, he grabbed the paper and sat down. The rest of the afternoon passed beneath a cloud of tension. Nobody talked much. Nobody joked. Even Noah remained unusually quiet. When the final bell rang, students left faster than usual. I stayed behind, organizing assignments. Outside, gray clouds drifted across the sky. The parking lot shimmered with puddles from yesterday's storm. I was stacking folders when the classroom phone rang. The sound startled me. Something in my stomach immediately tightened. I picked up the receiver. "Ms. Carter speaking." The voice on the other end belonged to Principal Harris. She sounded nervous. Very nervous. "Emily," she said, "can you come to my office?" "Of course." A pause followed. "Right now." 5 minutes later, I stepped into the administrative hallway. Secretaries sat unusually straight behind their desks. Teachers lingered nearby, pretending not to stare. The atmosphere felt wrong. Heavy. Anticipatory. Then I saw why. Through the glass walls of the principal's office, 3 men in dark suits stood silently near the door. And seated in the chair across from Principal Harris was a man whose photograph had appeared on magazine covers, charity billboards, and newspaper headlines for years. Vincent Moretti had come to the school. For a moment, I simply stood there staring through the glass. Vincent Moretti looked exactly the way powerful men always looked in photographs. Calm. Immaculate. Completely in control. His dark suit fit perfectly. Silver traced the edges of his black hair. Even seated, he carried the kind of presence that made people pay attention without realizing they were doing it. Principal Harris spotted me first. Relief flashed across her face. The kind of relief people feel when the person they have been waiting for finally arrives. Unfortunately, I was fairly certain she was not relieved for my benefit. One of the men near the door opened it. The movement was polite, professional. Still, it made my pulse quicken. I stepped inside. The office suddenly felt smaller. Vincent looked up from the folder resting on the principal's desk. His eyes settled on me. Not angry, not hostile, just observant. Like a man gathering information. "Ms. Carter," Principal Harris said quickly. "Thank you for coming." I nodded and took the empty chair across from them. Nobody spoke for a few seconds. The silence stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. Finally, Vincent broke it. "You are Noah's teacher." His voice was lower than I expected. Controlled. Measured. "Yes." He glanced at the folder. "And you gave my son a failing grade." There it was. The reason for the meeting. The reason every secretary in the building looked terrified. I folded my hands in my lap. I did. Principal Harris shifted nervously. Perhaps there has been some misunderstanding. Vincent did not look at her. His attention remained entirely on me. "Was there?" he asked. The question surprised me. I had expected demands, accusations, pressure. Instead, he sounded genuinely interested in the answer. "No," I said. "There was not." Principal Harris inhaled sharply. Vincent leaned back slightly. "Explain it to me." I reached into my folder and removed the assessment, the answer sheet, and samples of Noah's previous work. Then I carefully placed everything on the desk between us. My hands remained steady. I was proud of that. "The grade reflects the work submitted," I said. "Nothing else." Vincent lowered his eyes toward the papers. He studied them without interruption. The office became silent again except for the distant hum of the air conditioner. Nearly a minute passed. Finally, he looked up. "You believe my son cheated." "I believe the evidence supports that conclusion." Principal Harris looked like she wanted the floor to open beneath her. Vincent remained unreadable. "And if I disagree?" I met his gaze. My heart pounded against my ribs, but my voice remained calm. The evidence would still be the same. Another long silence followed. One of the men standing near the door shifted slightly. Principal Harris stared at me as if I had lost my mind. Vincent continued watching me. Then something unexpected happened. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. More like curiosity. Most people become nervous when speaking to me. I am nervous. You hide it well. Teaching 5th grade is excellent practice. For the first time, an actual smile appeared. Brief. Gone almost immediately. He looked back down at the papers. Noah says you are unfair. Noah is not accustomed to consequences. The words escaped before I could soften them. Principal Harris nearly choked. I expected Vincent's expression to harden. Instead, he remained thoughtful. Interesting. He closed the folder and stood. The movement instantly changed the energy in the room. Everyone else rose too. Vincent picked up the papers and tucked them beneath his arm. Then he looked directly at me. Thank you for your honesty, Miss Carter. I blinked. That was not the reaction anyone had expected. Least of all me. He started toward the door before pausing. One more thing. I waited. His eyes held mine. Calm. Sharp. Impossible to read. If these findings are correct, I will deal with the situation. Then he walked out. The office remained silent long after the door closed behind him. Principal Harris slowly sank back into her chair. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in 10 minutes. Yet something told me the story was not over. It was only beginning. The next morning arrived bright and clear, but the tension from the previous day followed me into school like a shadow. I expected whispers. I expected rumors. What I did not expect was Noah. He entered the classroom exactly at 7:45 a.m., carrying his backpack over one shoulder. No bodyguard walked him to the door. No confident smirk appeared on his face. For the first time since the school year began, he looked like an ordinary 10-year-old boy. Tired, distracted, quiet. He sat down without saying a word. Several students glanced in his direction. Nobody spoke. The room felt different. The usual invisible force field surrounding Noah had weakened. During morning attendance, he answered when I called his name, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. During math, he stared out the window more than at his worksheet. During reading, he barely participated at all. Something had happened after he left school yesterday. I could feel it. Shortly before lunch, Principal Harris appeared at my classroom door. Her expression carried none of the panic I had seen the day before. Instead, she seemed confused. Emily, may I speak with you for a moment? She asked. I stepped into the hallway. Everything all right? She nodded slowly. I received a call this morning. From whom? Mr. Moretti's office. My stomach tightened immediately, and she blinked as if she still could not believe what she was about to say. He requested copies of Noah's attendance records, disciplinary reports, and academic evaluations from the last 3 years. I stared at her. That is all. That is all. She lowered her voice. Do you know how unusual that is? I did. Most powerful parents demanded explanations. Vincent Moretti was asking for evidence. After lunch, the day continued quietly. Then something unexpected happened. The students began working on a group science project. Normally, Noah chose his partners without difficulty. Children gravitated toward him whether they wanted to or not. Today was different. As groups formed around the room, Noah remained seated alone. One by one, students joined other tables. Laughter filled the classroom. Conversation started. Chairs moved. Noah sat by himself, watching, waiting. For the first time, I saw the loneliness he had accidentally revealed during our conversation days earlier. Nobody ever picks me. The memory returned with uncomfortable clarity. Eventually, I walked over. Need help finding a group? He shrugged. I do not care. It was the kind of answer children give when they care very much. Before I could respond, Ethan looked up from across the room. He hesitated. Then he raised his hand. He can join ours if he wants. The entire classroom seemed to freeze. Noah looked stunned. Ethan looked nervous. I looked at both of them. Sometimes courage arrives in very small packages. That is kind of you, Ethan, I said. Noah remained motionless for several seconds. Then he quietly gathered his materials and moved to their table. The project began awkwardly. Nobody knew what to say. Yet as the afternoon progressed, something remarkable happened. They started working together. Not perfectly, not effortlessly, but genuinely. When the final bell rang, students packed their bags and hurried toward the exit. Noah lingered behind. He stood beside my desk for a moment before speaking. My father watched the security footage. I looked up. Security footage? He nodded. The cameras in the hallway. The cafeteria. Everywhere. His eyes dropped toward the floor. He saw everything. The words carried more weight than any punishment. Before I could answer, he shouldered his backpack and headed for the door. Then he stopped. For a second, I thought he was going to say something else. Instead, he quietly said, "Ethan's idea for the project was actually pretty good." And then he walked away. 3 days passed without incident. The classroom settled into a rhythm I had almost forgotten was possible. Noah still carried himself differently from the other students, but the sharp edge around him had begun to soften. He worked with his group. He listened more. He interrupted less. The change was small enough that most people would not notice it. Teachers notice small things for a living. On Thursday afternoon, Principal Harris appeared at my classroom door again. This time she looked completely overwhelmed. "Emily," she said, "can you come to the office when you have a moment?" I followed her after dismissal. The moment I entered her office, I understood why she seemed stunned. A large presentation board stood against the wall. Architectural renderings covered the conference table. Several documents lay neatly arranged beside them. "What is all this?" I asked. Principal Harris rubbed her forehead. "A donation." "A donation?" "A very large one." She handed me a folder. I opened it and nearly dropped it. The proposal outlined a complete renovation of the school library, new technology labs, updated classroom equipment, scholarships, and teacher development programs. The estimated value exceeded anything our school had ever received. "Who sent this?" I already knew the answer before she spoke. "The Moretti Foundation." I stared at the documents. Every school administrator in the state would have celebrated. Every parent would have applauded. Yet something about it felt wrong. "When did this arrive?" I asked. "This morning." "And why are you showing it to me?" Principal Harris hesitated. "Because there is a note." She handed me a single card. The handwriting was precise and elegant. It read, "For the students. Thank you for reminding us that standards matter. VM." I read it twice. Then a third time. "He is trying to thank you." Principal Harris said quietly. "Maybe." She looked confused. "Maybe." I closed the folder. This donation arrived 3 days after his son was disciplined. "Emily, this could change hundreds of children's lives." "I know." "Then what is the problem?" I took a slow breath. The answer was difficult to explain. "If this is accepted now, people will assume my decision came with a reward." Principal Harris blinked. "Nobody would think that." I gave her a look. She immediately realized I was right. Rumors grow faster than facts. A teacher fails the richest child in school. Days later, the father's foundation sends millions of dollars. The story practically writes itself. "What are you saying?" she asked. "I think we should decline it." The silence that followed was almost painful. "Decline it?" she repeated. "Yes." "Emily, do you realize how much money this is?" "Yes." "Do you realize what it could do for this school?" "Yes." "Then why?" I looked toward the window. Children were playing on the soccer field beneath the afternoon sun. "Because I teach students," I said quietly, "not customers." Principal Harris stared at me. The room became very still. A few minutes later, after a long discussion, she reluctantly agreed to contact the foundation. I expected the matter to end there. It did not. The next evening, as I packed papers into my bag after work, a black sedan pulled into the nearly empty parking lot. One man stepped out and approached the building. A minute later, there was a knock on my classroom door. I looked up. Vincent Moretti stood in the doorway. He was alone. No assistants. No advisors. No entourage. Just a father. And judging by the expression in his eyes, he had come for answers. For a second, neither of us spoke. The late afternoon sunlight stretched across the classroom floor, painting long shadows between the desks. Vincent Moretti stood in the doorway with one hand resting lightly against the frame. Without the conference rooms, newspaper cameras, and endless rumors surrounding his name, he seemed different. Still powerful. Still intimidating. But also tired. "May I come in?" he asked. The question surprised me. Most people with his influence probably stopped asking permission years ago. Of course. He stepped inside and quietly closed the door behind him. The classroom suddenly felt smaller. Vincent glanced around the room. Student artwork covered the walls. Science projects lined the shelves. Handwritten essays hung beside colorful posters. "Noah talks about this room more than you might think," he said. "That is difficult to imagine." A faint smile crossed his face. I thought so too. He approached one of the student displays and studied it for a moment. Then he turned toward me. You declined the donation. Yes. Most schools would not. Most schools are not in this situation. He nodded slowly. There was no anger in his expression, only curiosity. Why? I folded my arms. Because children notice everything. Children do not read foundation reports. No, but they notice when adults bend rules. His eyes remained fixed on mine. You believe accepting the donation would send the wrong message. I believe Noah needs to see that accountability cannot be purchased. The words hung in the air between us. Vincent looked away first. He walked toward the window and stared out at the empty playground. Do you know what I saw when I reviewed the security footage? He asked quietly. I shook my head. A boy trying very hard to impress people who were already afraid of him. His reflection appeared faintly in the glass. I spent years building a life that could protect him. Somewhere along the way, he started believing protection and privilege were the same thing. I remained silent. Some truths do not need interruption. Vincent sighed. When Noah was younger, he used to ask why other children did not invite him to birthday parties. The admission caught me off guard. What did you tell him? I told him people were intimidated. He gave a humorless smile. It sounded better than the truth. And the truth? They did not know him. The classroom became quiet again. Outside, a soccer ball rolled across the field in the distance. Vincent slowly turned back toward me. You were right. I blinked. About what? Nobody tells him when he is wrong. The words carried more weight than any apology. Most people are afraid to disappoint powerful parents. You were not. I was. That answer seemed to surprise him. Then why did you do it? I looked around the classroom. The desks. The books. The projects. The small world entrusted to me every day. Because children become what adults allow. Vincent lowered his eyes. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he nodded once. A decision seemed to settle inside him. Tomorrow is Saturday, he said. Noah and I are spending the day at one of our community centers. I waited. He is going to volunteer. I smiled slightly. He is going to hate that. For the first time, Vincent laughed. It was brief, but genuine. Almost certainly. He started toward the door. Before leaving, he stopped and looked back at me. You know, Miss Carter, people spend years trying to impress me. And you are the first person who ever impressed me by refusing something. I felt my face grow warm. Vincent opened the door. Thank you for seeing my son clearly. Then he left. I stood alone in the quiet classroom long after he was gone. For the first time since this began, I understood something important. Noah was changing, but so was his father. And somehow, neither transformation had started with power. It had started with a single word nobody else had been willing to say. No. The school year passed faster than I expected. Winter gave way to spring. Spring surrendered to summer. Somewhere between science projects, spelling tests, field trips, and report cards, Noah Moretti became a different child. Not perfect. Not even close. He still argued when he thought he was right. He still carried traces of the confidence that came from growing up in a world few people could imagine. But now he listened. He apologized when he made mistakes. He learned how to work beside people instead of above them. Most importantly, he learned that respect could not be demanded. It had to be earned. On the morning of the end-of-year awards ceremony, sunlight poured through the auditorium windows. Hundreds of parents filled the seats. Cameras flashed. Children adjusted graduation gowns and whispered excitedly to one another. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. I stood near the side of the stage holding a stack of certificates. The school band played softly in the background while families searched for their children in the crowd. Then I saw Noah. He sat in the second row beside his classmates. Not in a special section. Not surrounded by security. Just another student waiting for his name to be called. Ethan sat beside him. The two boys were quietly discussing something that made them both laugh. The sight almost made me smile. Principal Harris stepped onto the stage and welcomed everyone. Awards followed one after another. Academic achievement, community service, leadership, improvement. Applause echoed throughout the auditorium after every announcement. Finally, Principal Harris approached the microphone again. Her smile widened. This next award recognizes extraordinary personal growth. It is presented to a student who demonstrated resilience, accountability, and genuine character throughout the school year. The room quieted. This year's Most Improved Student Award goes to Noah Moretti. For a brief moment, nobody moved. Then the applause began. Loud, genuine, earned. Noah looked stunned. His classmates immediately started clapping. Ethan was the first person to stand. Others followed. Noah slowly rose from his seat and walked toward the stage. I noticed something remarkable as he crossed the room. Nobody looked afraid of him anymore. They looked proud of him. There is a difference. Principal Harris handed him the award. The applause continued. Then something unexpected happened. Vincent Moretti stood up from the audience. Every conversation stopped instantly. Even after all these months, his presence still carried weight. He walked toward the stage and quietly accepted a microphone from Principal Harris. The auditorium fell completely silent. Vincent looked at Noah first. Then he turned toward the audience. For most of my life, he said, I believed success meant protecting the people I loved from failure. His voice carried clearly through the room. I was wrong. Nobody moved. Nobody looked away. Failure is not the enemy. Sometimes it is the beginning of becoming better. He glanced toward Noah again. Pride filled his expression. Not pride in achievement. Pride in growth. Then his eyes found me standing near the curtain. This young man received his first failing grade this year. Soft laughter rippled through the audience. Noah covered his face in embarrassment. Vincent smiled. At the time, he thought it was the worst thing that had ever happened to him. More laughter followed. Then Vincent's expression became serious. It was actually one of the best things. The auditorium grew quiet once more. He pointed gently toward me. She was the first person brave enough to tell my son the truth when everyone else chose comfort. My throat tightened. She reminded him that character matters more than status, that honesty matters more than appearances, and that accountability is not punishment. It is opportunity. The room erupted into applause. I felt my face grow warm. Vincent lowered the microphone and looked directly at Noah. The city may know my name, he said. But this year, I learned something more important. The people who change lives are not always the ones with power. Sometimes they are the ones with principles. The applause grew even louder. As I stood there listening, I realized the story had never really been about a grade. It was about a boy who learned humility, a father who learned honesty, and a simple lesson that echoed far beyond one classroom. You can buy buildings. You can buy influence. You can buy almost anything in the world. But character must be earned. And that lesson is worth more than all the power in the city.